we're now going to welcome Natalie down to the stage, who's going to talk about the generational differences in approaching mental illness and why it isn't always about beating mental health, but maybe just understanding the battle a little better. Come on down.
I have a clear memory of the first time I thought of taking my own life. And even though it scared me, the thought was in my mind, and it felt like it would never go away. The idea that I could stop my own heart or keep myself from breathing with such a small action absolutely terrified me. But at the same time, I was obsessed with the idea of it. I was 14 years old. Of course, these feelings didn't emerge overnight. For as long as I can remember, I have dealt with mental health issues. At 4 years old, I was in occupational therapy to deal with my high sensitivity to new sounds, tastes, textures, and environments. It wasn't until I was 6 or 7 when I was officially diagnosed with OCD and anxiety. And now I've been in one type of therapy or another for nearly 10 years. Most people have heard of OCD, and it's often joked about when people are really tidy, but there's so much more to it than having a compulsion to wash your hands 10 times before eating a meal. For some people, this may be the case, but for me personally, it's a little bit different. I worry my brain is going to make me do stupid or violent things, like start screaming in the middle of the hallway at school or walk right into the middle of traffic. But it's not just in my head. I often have to redo whole sections of my notes, or even multiple pages if I don't like the way they look. It's time-consuming, but it's a compulsion, and that's why I do it. I also trace things. When the teacher is writing something on the whiteboard or I see something across the room, I will trace it with my finger in midair or in my legs. I don't know why I do it, but I do it anyway. The hardest time of my life was in middle school. I had lots of great friends, but there were a few girls who didn't treat me very nicely. In fact, I was bullied by some of these girls. This took a toll on my self-esteem, and by the time I was 13, I started showing symptoms of depression. I had been seeing my current therapist for a few years, and she immediately started helping me cope with it. Sadly, I became more depressed, and it really started to interfere with my daily life. It got to the point where I couldn't go to school or after school activities because of my anxiety, and staying home so much only made my depression worse. It even led me down a path I never thought possible. I started to have thoughts of suicide, feeling like all my friends had forgotten about me and that I had no purpose in this world. I felt empty, and sometimes it felt like my world was spinning out of control. This feeling started to lessen when school got out, and eventually, with a combination of medication and therapy, I started to climb out of that depression. But my constant companion, anxiety, never left my side. I was nervous about high school approaching and worried that I wasn't going to get better by the time high school started. During that summer, I was a counselor at a day camp, a summer activity I always look forward to. But on the 4th day of camp, I was too anxious to go. So I grabbed some scissors and started making scratches on my arms while my dad waited for me in the car. My parents got me in with my therapist right away, and I remember the exact words she used to turn my life around. If you had cut any deeper, you could have hit a vein and died. At this moment, there was nothing I wanted to do more than to get better. And I did. I finally started using my coping skills. My doctor tweaked my medication, and I started attending weekly group therapy sessions with other teenage girls suffering from mental health issues. And still, most people would have no idea what I've been through. From the outside, I look like every other kid. I hang out with my friends, I read books, I go to movies and listen to music. I'm involved in school activities like track and leadership. I have an opinion on the Chris War. It's Hemsworth, obviously. I do all those things while continuing to fight daily anxiety and occasional bouts of depression. I'm fortunate that I'm now better at using my coping skills when I'm feeling more anxious or depressed, and can usually get myself feeling grounded again. Deep breathing is my go-to skill, and reading, writing, and listening to music also work well for me. It wasn't until more recently that I realized how great of a coping skill physical activity is. Since I've started participating in high school track and field, Running and being around my friends has improved my self-esteem, mental and physical health. Now when I have a bad day at school, I have track practice to help me relax. I've learned that none of this has destroyed me or my desire to live my life to the fullest. And while I know I may never beat anxiety and depression, I'm equally confident that I won't let it beat me. It was only recently that I became interested in educating others about mental health, but I've gained so much knowledge about how important it is. If we don't talk about it, we're just feeding the never-ending cycle of silence and isolation. Talking about mental health is still a taboo among many parts of society, and far too many people don't seek the help they need. My grandmother is one of those people. She is currently recovering from severe anxiety and depression, still feeling shameful about her diagnosis. Unlike my generation, where mental health is talked about more openly, my grandmother grew up without the same support and resources available to help her cope. And it's not just my grandmother. Mental health issues and alcoholism are scattered throughout my family tree over many generations. But they didn't speak about their troubles. They certainly didn't stand up in front of a room of total strangers and share their most vulnerable thoughts. Oh my gosh. Sorry. I want to break that cycle. I know I'm not the only teen who suffers from mental illness. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 1 in 5, or 15 million, American children and young adults struggle with mental illness or a learning disorder. And suicide is the second leading cause of death among this age group. That tells us that mental illness is no small issue. Luckily, organizations like ASHA and people like us give me hope that those of us suffering from mental illness will find strength and comfort from society rather than fear and isolation. If you or someone you know is currently struggling with mental health issues, I urge you to get help or be part of the support system for that person. When we work together, even the smallest actions can make the biggest differences in changing how society views mental health. Thank you for letting me share my story.